Welcome back. If you're joining us for this deep dive into the Texas Revolution, we're basically standing in the immediate aftermath of Gonzales. That first clash is over. The Texians held their ground, kept that little 4-pounder cannon, and really they proved they would fight back against what they saw as oppression.
Yeah, and that fight, even though it was, pretty small scale, just a skirmish, really, it was huge symbolically.
Right.
The settlers themselves, they immediately saw it as their Lexington and Concord moment. It felt like a definitive break, proof positive that they actually had the will to resist.
And the sources we're looking at, they really echo that. Yoakum says the ball of revolution was now fairly put in motion. No going back after that point.
Exactly. No turning back.
But here's where things get interesting and complicated. The goal instantly changed from just defending a cannon in one town to, well, a much bigger challenge.
A much bigger challenge. Suddenly, the focus is on General Cos. He's gathered a pretty significant professional Mexican army force right in the heart of Texas in San Antonio de Besar.
So Bexar becomes the strategic center, the main Mexican military presence they have to deal with.
That's the enemy's anchor point in Texas, yeah. If they want to control Texas, they have to deal with Cowes and San Antonio.
Okay, but the reality for the Texians, coming off that Gonzales win, it wasn't quite matching the enthusiasm. We're talking about this army of the people, right?
That's the term, yeah.
Yeah.
And it captures the spirit perfectly. Highly motivated, absolutely. But organized, not so much.
It sounds like a classic volunteer force, just settlers grabbing their rifles, rushing to the cause. Not exactly a trained standing army.
Not at all. And that's the huge headache facing Stephen F. Austin, who's trying to lead this effort. Volunteers are flooding in, which is great, but they're desperate for the basics.
Like what? Weapons? Food?
Everything. Arms, ammunition, organization, leadership structure, and certainly not the kind of artillery or sustained supply lines you need to actually attack a fortified city like San Antonio.
Right. You can't just charge the walls with enthusiasm alone.
You really can't.
Yeah.
Sheer Texian grit wasn't going to be enough for a siege.
So, okay, we've got this picture. The main Texian force, this army of the people, is gathering. Austin's trying to whip them into shape. They're starting this slow, inevitable march inland towards San Antonio.
A very slow march.
But think about it from Cos's perspective in Bexar. He's got professional soldiers, fortifications. How worried is he really about this somewhat chaotic group slowly making its way towards him?
Well, that's the strategic question, isn't it? Cos is likely focused on his main stronghold. He's probably expecting a direct confrontation, eventually. But any smart military mind knows a frontal assault isn't the only way to win.
Especially with an army that's, well, not exactly well-equipped for that.
Precisely. Victory for the Texians needed something else. Something unexpected. It required initiative, maybe a different approach than just marching straight at the enemy.
They needed to find a way to level the playing field before that main army even got close to San Antonio.
Exactly. So the question becomes, if the enemy's strength is concentrated in San Antonio, where's the weakness?
Where's the vulnerability?
The Achilles heel, so to speak. And it turns out the key wasn't another battle right then, but it was logistics. A vulnerability far south of where Austin's army was gathering.
Okay.
You had this separate, smaller group of settlers, patriots down near the coast, acting pretty much independently. And they recognized that Cos, sitting up in San Antonio, absolutely depended on a supply line.
A supply line that was maybe
Dangerously exposed, as it turned out. And this realization leads us straight to the target, Presidio La Bahia.
Which we know today as Goliad.
That's the one. And this wasn't just some random raid idea. This was shaping up to be a critical strategic move. The idea was to essentially choke off Cos's supplies.
So less about a battle, more about crippling the enemy indirectly.
That's a big part of it. It became this plan for a daring, super-fast strike against this vital coastal supply depot at Goliad.
What were they hoping to achieve? Just disrupt things?
It was really twofold. First, grab the military supplies they desperately needed for their own army. Arms, ammo, maybe even cannons.
Arm themselves with the enemy's gear.
Exactly. And second, and maybe even more importantly, cut Cos off. Isolate him in San Antonio before Austin's main army could even arrive to start a proper siege.
Yeah.
Hit him where it hurts his supplies.
All right, let's dig into the southern group then. Who were these guys? They weren't waiting for Austin's orders, it sounds like.
No, not at all. And that's one of the really fascinating things about this stage of the revolution, how decentralized it still was. This Goliad plan seems to have sprung up almost entirely independent of Austin's main force near Gonzoles.
So local initiative driving things.
Very much so. We see prominent settlers from the Matagorda area getting heavily involved. Captain George Collinsworth is a key figure here. These were guys like John Dunn, Ira Ingram, names you see later on in important documents. They were deeply committed to the cause already.
These weren't just random farmers then, they were community leaders down there.
Right. They saw a local opportunity, a strategic one, and felt the necessity to act immediately. It wasn't about waiting for some central command structure that didn't really exist yet. It shows you the revolutionary spirit wasn't just centered in one place like Gonzales. It was popping up all over.
That really paints a picture of grassroots action.
It does. And speaking of leadership and commitment, kind of emerging from the chaos, you get the almost unbelievable story of Colonel Benjamin Melam turning up.
Ben Melam. He was already a known figure, right? A strong Republican.
Oh, absolutely. Not someone keeping a low profile. Melam was well known for his Republican zeal, which had actually landed him in prison under the Mexican authorities. He was seen as a troublemaker.
So he'd been arrested?
Arrested and imprisoned, specifically for his political views and actions. But incredibly, he manages to escape. And he's basically on the run, trying to reconnect with the patriot cause.
Okay.
When he literally accidentally bumps into this group of Matagorda volunteers, led by Collinsworth, near Goliad.
Like while they were marching?
Even better. According to Yoakum's account, he stumbles upon them on the very night they're getting ready to attack the Presidio.
You're kidding. He just shows up at the exact right moment. He wasn't part of the plan.
Seems not. He just sort of falls in with them as they're either finalizing the plan or just about to launch the assault.
Wow. That sounds like something out of a movie.
It really does. But it's more than just a dramatic coincidence, you know. It highlights the nature of the Texian effort at this point. It's incredibly determined, yes, but also kind of messy and improvisational.
Leadership wasn't always formal. Sometimes it was just about respected, charismatic figures like Melam showing up where the action was.
Exactly. Finding the nearest, most critical fight and jumping in. His presence must have been a huge boost to those volunteers right before they went over the wall, so to speak.
Okay, that sets a dramatic scene for sure. But let's get back to the target itself. Presidio La Bahia Goliad. Why this place? What made it such a crucial objective? This soft underbelly Cos hadn't protected enough.
It really comes down to two things: geography and logistics. Goliad wasn't chosen because it was a major population center like San Antonio. Its importance was purely military and strategic.
Location, location, location.
Pretty much. The Presidio, the old fort there, sat squarely on the main road, the Atascocito Road, basically, that connected the main port of entry on the coast.
Which was?
Port of Copano, down on Orenses Bay. That was the key landing spot for ships bringing supplies and troops from Mexico.
Ah, okay. So supplies land at Copano.
And then they have to be hauled overland, inland, to supply the forces deeper in Texas. And the main route, the necessary route to get to San Antonio, went right through Goliad.
It's a bottleneck, a choke point on the supply line.
Exactly. It was the central hub, the main depot, the mandatory stop on their whole coastal corridor, linking the port to Cos's army concentrated up in San Antonio.
So Cos needs this route constantly to keep his army fed, armed, and potentially reinforced.
Absolutely. He'd moved a significant force into Bexar. That requires a steady stream of provisions: food, gunpowder, lead, muskets, everything. And any reinforcements coming by sea would land at Copano and travel that same road.
Which means Goliad must have been used as a major storage place, a depot.
That's precisely what it was known to be. A substantial depot holding valuable military supplies, munitions, all the stuff needed to sustain Cos's army for potentially a long campaign or occupation.
So why wasn't it better defended? If it's that critical, you'd think Cos would have put a stronger garrison there.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It could suggest a few things. Maybe some overconfidence on Cos's part.
Thinking the Texians weren't capable of striking that far south or that quickly.
Possibly. Or maybe just misjudging their strategic capability. Remember, Cos was dealing with increasing defiance. He was demanding settlers be handed over to the military. His focus might have been more on asserting authority and preparing for a direct confrontation with Austin's slowly gathering army coming from the east.
So he's looking north and east towards Gonzales and Austin and maybe underestimated the threat from the south, from the coast.
That seems plausible. He might have assumed the main threat was the main body of volunteers and didn't anticipate a smaller independent force could or would execute such a, well, sophisticated flanking maneuver against his logistical base hundreds of miles away.
Leaving Goliad relatively under-garrisoned and vulnerable.
Exactly. Which was the opening Collinsworth and the Matagorda volunteers saw.
So by hitting Goliad, they weren't just aiming for supplies. They were aiming to cut the legs out from under Cose's entire operation in Texas.
Precisely. It was about isolating him, making sure that when Austin's army did eventually arrive at San Antonio, Cos would already be weakened, cut off, potentially low on essential supplies.
Strangling the main Mexican military force by cutting its lifeline. That transforms us from just scattered resistance into something much more coordinated, strategically speaking.
It absolutely does. It shows a developing understanding of how to fight and win this war. And the success of the whole revolution at this early stage suddenly seemed to hinge on this daring raid by this relatively small group of guys from the coast.
Okay, let's shift to the raid itself. The night of October 9th, going into the 10th, 1835, we know the volunteers had to move fast. How did they manage to coordinate this, given the sort of charming chaos we talked about earlier?
Well, the speed was the coordination, in a way. Just like at Gonzales, the key was urgency. They saw the opportunity, they knew Cosa's main attention was elsewhere, and they just went for it.
No time to waste writing formal orders or organizing battalions.
Exactly. The sources, like Yoakum, emphasized there was no time to enroll, organize. It was immediate action based on immediate knowledge and perceived necessity. You see the same pattern. Local committees of safety, like the one in Matagorda, putting out the call, and the local settlers responding instantly.
Bypassing the need for a central command structure that, frankly, wasn't really there yet.
Right. And the attack plan itself played to the strengths of a fast, maybe less organized force. Surprise and darkness.
Attacking at night, October 9th. The garrison inside wouldn't be expecting it.
Probably not. They'd be relying on the stone walls of the Presidio, the fact that it was a known fortification, and maybe the general assumption that the Texians were still disorganized and focused way up near Gonzales.
That combination, strong walls but a small garrison, makes surprise absolutely critical. How did they actually get inside?
They used the darkness to get close without being detected. The sources mention a key detail, using axes to break down a door.
Axes. Not exactly subtle.
Not subtle, no, but effective. It wasn't about stealth once they reached the walls. It was about getting inside fast. Breach the defenses quickly, overwhelm the small garrison before they could mount a coordinated defense, and seize the supplies. That was the goal.
And this is where Ben Milam, fresh from prison, literally joins the charge.
Right into the thick of it. He arrives just as this is happening. Imagine the psychological impact on the other volunteers.
Yeah, having this known, committed leader suddenly appear must have been huge.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Here's this symbol of resistance, someone who's already suffered for the cause, joining them at the most critical, dangerous moment. Even if his command was totally spontaneous, it must have fired them up tremendously. It validated their risky plan.
So was it a long, drawn-out fight inside the Presidio?
No. By all accounts, it was remarkably quick and decisive. The surprise worked.
Any idea on casualties?
The sources we're looking at don't give precise numbers for the Goliad fight itself, but they consistently emphasize minimal Texian losses in these early skirmishes. That points towards the effectiveness of the surprise and the speed of the assault. The Mexican garrison was likely overwhelmed very quickly.
So they secured a fortified, walled stone presidio, a major Mexican military installation, in what sounds like a matter of hours with hardly any losses.
That's the picture we get. It's pretty astounding when you think about it.
It really is. Just days before, the big deal was defending a tiny cannon out in the open. Now they've successfully stormed and captured a major fort.
It's a massive leap in capability and audacity. It proved the Texians weren't just capable of localized defense, they could plan and execute offensive military operations. They could take the fight to the enemy and win.
And the timing, hitting Goliad right after the news of Gonzales reached Cos.
Masterful.
Yeah.
Or maybe just incredibly fortunate timing, driven by that local initiative. Cos hears about Gonzales around October 4th or 5th. Just a few days later, bam, his main supply depot is gone.
Before he even has time to react, maybe reinforce Goliad or reroute supplies?
Exactly. It kept the Mexican command completely off balance. And the news of this victory, capturing Goliad, must have sent morale soaring throughout the Texian settlements. They weren't just pushing back anymore. They were actively taking ground, taking forts, winning.
Which brings us directly to the spoils of war. The reason this raid was so strategically vital beyond just isolating Cos, let's talk about what they actually found inside that presidio.
Okay, yeah. Because before Goliad, we established the Texian volunteers were enthusiastic, but really poorly equipped. Desperate, even.
Right, relying on their own hunting guns, whatever the committees could scrape together. Yoka mentions extraordinary exertions just to find powder and lead.
They were basically farmers and settlers facing a professional army with standardized gear. That lack of equipment, more than anything, was their biggest weakness.
So, did the Goliad haul actually fix that problem? How much stuff did they really get?
It was a game changer, a genuine treasure trove for the revolution. Just look at the artillery.
Okay.
At Gonzales, they fought tooth and nail for one little 4-pounder cannon. Useful, symbolic, but light field artillery. At Goliad, they captured substantial stores of cannon. We're talking heavier pieces, more effective artillery.
The kind you'd actually need for a siege.
Precisely. Cannons were incredibly rare and valuable on the frontier. Suddenly, the Texians had a real artillery capability. They had the tools they needed to potentially breach the walls of San Antonio later on.
Wow. So they went from having almost no artillery to having a battery, basically overnight.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the big guns. The inventory included hundreds of muskets.
Muskets.
Yeah.
Standard military issue, presumably.
Standard issue muskets, yes. Enough to properly arm whole companies of new volunteers who were showing up with nothing. Plus, critically, the ammunition to go with them. Gunpowder, lead balls, everything needed to make those weapons useful.
And other supplies, too. Food. Money.
Yes, thousands of dollars worth of military provisions and stores. This was the stuff intended to feed, clothe, and sustain General Cos's army during their occupation of Texas.
So the Texians literally captured the resources meant to suppress them and used them to fuel their own rebellion.
That's exactly what happened. It's more than just a morale boost. It's strategic judo. They used the enemy's own logistics against them. It was effectively self-funding and self-arming the revolution through captured goods.
That is incredibly significant. It solves their most pressing problem, the lack of equipment and supplies.
It was arguably the single most effective logistical move of the entire early phase of the war. It addressed that immediate crisis and really enabled the next stage.
How so?
Well, the volunteer force could now start to standardize its weapons somewhat. They could train crews on the captured artillery, and they had the provisions to sustain a longer campaign. They transformed almost overnight from that spontaneous local militia into something resembling a more legitimate military force, capable of undertaking a major operation like besieging San Antonio.
And this success, this material gain, it had immediate practical consequences for the army's structure too, right?
It did. The volunteers who took Goliad didn't just, celebrate and go home. Some remained to garrison the captured fort, securing that strategic location.
Holding on to their prize.
Right. And others, crucially, took the captured supplies and marched north to join the main army that was gathering under Austin.
Reinforcing Austin's force with men and much-needed material.
Exactly. And this victory, combined with the captured supplies, really gave Stephen F. Austin the mandate and, importantly, the means to formalize the campaign. He had been leading as chairman of the Committee of Austin's jurisdiction.
But now he could take formal command of this larger, better-equipped force.
That's right. The Goliad victory provided both the confidence and the essential equipment needed to finally begin that definitive march towards San Antonio. It unlocked the next phase.
Okay, let's pull back for a second and look at the big picture here. We've talked about Gonzales, now Goliad. If you had to summarize the ultimate impact of this Goliad raid, this daring strike, what would it be? Why is it so critical, even if it sometimes gets lost between the Alamo and San Jacinto?
I think it has this crucial dual impact. It's the bridge, really, between the initial spark of rebellion and a viable military campaign.
Okay, dual impact. What's the first part?
First, tactically and for morale, it achieved that immediate goal we just discussed. It equipped the army. The volunteers got the cannons, the muskets, the ammo they desperately needed. That's huge, practically. But it also gave them this massive psychological boost. They had just outsmarted and defeated the professional army, seized a fortress, and taken their supplies. It fueled the belief they could actually win.
They didn't just capture a fort, they captured the means to wage war.
Perfectly put. And then there's the second impact, which is arguably even more significant strategically.
The blow against Cos himself.
Yes. The capture of Goliad effectively isolated General Cos and his entire garrison in San Antonio.
Cut him off.
Completely cut off from his primary supply route from the coast. Think about that. Suddenly, Cos can only rely on whatever food and ammunition he already has stockpiled inside Bexar. Reinforcements by sea. Forget it. Or at least make it vastly more difficult and time-consuming.
So his position, which maybe seemed secure before, instantly becomes precarious.
Highly precarious. Strategically, he He's now surrounded, cut off from reliable resupply, just waiting as Austin's army, now better armed because of Goliad, slowly makes its way towards him. It put him in an incredibly tough spot.
That really reframes things. We often think of Gonzales as the start, the symbolic come-and-take-its moment. But does Goliad maybe mark the real military beginning of the revolution in a strategic sense?
You know, I'd strongly argue that it does. Gonzales was the statement of intent, the refusal to back down. But Goliad shifted the conflict.
How so?
It moved beyond a localized defensive scrap over a cannon. It became a full-blown offensive military campaign aimed at neutralizing the main enemy force. The Texians showed audacity, yes, but also a surprisingly sophisticated grasp of logistics for volunteer force.
Understanding that cutting supply lines is as important as winning battles.
Absolutely. That's a key principle of warfare, and they executed it brilliantly here. Whether by deliberate genius or fortunate opportunism, they proved they could move decisively, fight effectively, and capture major fortified positions. Goliad demonstrated they could wage war, not just resist.
It's the crucial difference between just defending your home and actively trying to win control of the territory. They took the fight to the enemy and seized the resources needed to continue that fight.
Exactly. They took the supplies, intended to crush their rebellion, and turn them into the fuel for it. After Goliad, the Texian army is more unified. It's focused on a single objective, Bexar, and critically, it's armed, partly thanks to the enemy themselves. The enemy, meanwhile, is cut off. The whole strategic landscape has shifted.
The stage is well and truly set now.
It really is. Those first two blows landed hard. Gonzales proved the Texians had the nerve, the will to fight.
And Goliad proved they had the skill, the strategy, and now the means to win. They could pull off complex operations and hit the enemy where it hurt.
And with General Cos now isolated in San Antonio, his supply lines severed thanks to that daring raid. The volunteers, feeling more like soldiers now, finally arrived at the gates.
The gates of the biggest prize in all of Texas, San Antonio de Bexar itself.
The siege was about to begin.
And that siege will push this newly confident, newly equipped army of the people to its limits. It's the next major test, and that's exactly where we'll pick up in our next deep dive.